Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Center for Healthy Sex Daily Meditation this month on needs. I just want to invite you to text any questions you have as we go along, any comments you want to make, anything that you think is, at least slightly relevant. Certainly when we're in these conversations, there's all kinds of free associations people make, so there's nothing right or wrong about how you chime in. And occasionally Tom will open the phone line so that you can ask questions directly. But in the text box to the left of your screen, feel free to chat any questions you have for me, and I, of course, will also ask you to type in questions too. All right, so we'll get started. So let's look at the word need, and we have a quote here from Marshall Rosenberg who says, "We are aware that we can never meet our own needs at the expense of others. Emotional liberation involves stating clearly what we need in a way that communicates we are equally concerned that the needs of others be fulfilled." So I often like to break these quotes down and take a look at what exactly the author is saying here. So we are aware that we can never meet our own needs at the expense of others. And that's a really provocative statement, I think, because this is the paradox that we live in, one of many when we're in relationship with other people. And it's always about the paradox Patrick Carnes talks about between fidelity to the self and fidelity to others. And this is especially important, when you are a parent, for example. How do you stay faithful to your children's needs and your own needs? And mothers are very aware that often they sacrifice their needs, over and over and over again for years and decades as they get their children launched. And not just mothers, but fathers too, certainly. So that's a really vital example of the paradox between fidelity of self and fidelity of others and how we compromise or get our needs met. And this is true in a love relationship also, which is predominantly what we're going to be talking about today, not parenting so much, but really in your love relationships, how do you get your own needs met and how do you not compromise the needs of your partner? Very tricky. And I don't think there's an answer to that. I think that's the question. Rosenberg goes on to state that emotional liberation involves stating clearly what we need in a way that communicates we are equally concerned that the needs of others be fulfilled. So there again is another enormously tall order. It's like me saying, well, I really need time to myself, and I also want to honor your need to spend time with me. So how are we going to both get what we need at that time? And that's about negotiation, obviously, and communication between two. So we all have needs, and whether they're met or unmet, we would hardly be human if we didn't have needs. And, I just want to clarify that the needs that we are most familiar with usually are the basic human needs of food, clothing, and shelter. And I'm talking about emotional dependency needs, the kind of things that, again, if we look at what children need, we need them all the way until the day we die. We need affection. We need love. We need a sense of security, a sense of safety, emotional connection, validation, meaning, connection, many, many different things that we need from a partner and that we also want to, not only give but get as well. Or not only get, but give as well too. So support, nurturing, warmth, a sense of emotional and physical care. These are all human needs that we have. So think about what your needs are for a moment and what needs are getting met and what needs are unmet. And this is something that you probably can't do in a moment, but it's worth maybe taking a note here to say, when this webinar's over, I'm actually going to make a list of what needs I really, really want to get met that aren't being met right now. And sometimes those are needs that we need to meet for ourselves, and actually when we do, other people meet them for us. So the only people really who get their needs met 24/7 or should from others would be children, infants and children. And as adults, we're always not going to get what we need, but we can certainly try to give it to ourselves too. And there's no shame or weakness in desiring validation or affection. I mean, sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, I'm so needy." And who isn't needy? Of course you're needy and you have needs. But if you reject the fact that you are having these needs and you judge yourself, then you're going to feel needy, which I think equates with feeling simpering, yeah, or weak. And having needs is not being weak. It's being human. So imagine the unmet needs that might exist for others in your life right now. So first, I talked about yourself to make a list of the needs that you're not getting met, but I'm also suggesting that you make a list of needs that you think your partner's not getting met from you. And these again would be typically emotional needs. Have you made agreements to meet the needs of people in your life that you haven't followed through on? In which case, you really need to take stock of those as well. So, what's truly damaging to our lives? What brings unnecessary pain and deprivation? It's either refusing to acknowledge that we have needs or being unable to voice them to others. And what do you think happens when you can't voice your needs to other people? Well, usually what happens is we expect them to mind read, which none of us are very good at, and then we can have resentments because our needs aren't getting met because we haven't told anybody that we have these needs. And that creates a victim stance and can have us feeling very alone and lonely and isolated. So think about some of the reasons you have for not expressing your needs, and oftentimes these are things that we say because we think that we're putting somebody out or we're inconveniencing them or we don't want to lay that on them. And really by doing that, there's no way the people around us know what we want or what we need. So does anybody have any thoughts about this before I move to the next slide? About this topic is called, or the slide is called Normalizing Needs. So what I'm saying is that we all have needs. We are all needy by definition because we're human. We can't expect to get our needs met all the time by the people around us because we're not children, but we can meet our own needs, and we can make it clear to our partners that we understand that they have needs too, and also look at how we are not helping our partners get their needs met. Let's see. So it looks like Kim says, I don't express needs because I don't want the other person, presumably them, to go away. And that is a way to keep yourself in deprivation and also keep yourself feeling, mostly deprived and victimized and not getting what you want. So if you express a need to somebody and they go away, they're probably not the right person for you. So if I say to somebody, boy, I really need you to stay close to me when we're in a crowded mall because I have a little bit of claustrophobia and I don't like to be separated. And I know that's kind of a funny thing, but if you could just hold my hand when we're in crowds, that would really make a big difference to me. And if somebody judges that and says there's something wrong with you or you're too needy, then they're going to judge all of your needs, and that is not a person for you to be with. So look at how you are depriving yourself and not getting your needs met and staying in deprivation because you're too busy caretaking to the other person so they won't leave you. That, unfortunately, is a codependent stance and one you want to take a good look at. Scott says, I can tell when I need food. I know what it feels like to feel hungry, or when I need to sleep, I feel sleepy. However, when I need affection, it's not so clear. And that's a really great and astute way of, it's really great that you see it, and it's astute that you see it. So when I think about affection, I think about touch. And our skin is the biggest organ in our body, and so many of us are touch deprived from infancy or childhood that we alternatively want and need it, but we also can be repulsed by it because our nervous systems are not geared towards taking touch in. So the thing we need most is the thing we were deprived of, and it's also the thing that can have us feeling suffocated or like somebody's clawing at us. So everybody's nervous system is different. So I really want to encourage you to try and start to ask for more touch on a regular basis from the people in your life, males and females alike, asking for a hug when you say goodbye to somebody, or greeting people with a hug, or asking somebody, presumably a love relationship, to hold your hand or rub your head or stroke your shoulders. But mostly hugging is one of the most regulating things we can do to our nervous systems. And when couples are in relationship, it's the hugging that gets them attuned, where your hearts start to beat together, your breath starts to synchronize. There's what we call a co-regulatory process taking place there in the nervous system. And hugging is by far more regulating than a kiss on the mouth or a peck on the cheek is. That can start to be a perfunctory way of greeting our partners, but hugging deeply, full body hugs, really starts to change your nervous system and will change it over time. So I recommend that you ask for more touch and more affection from the people around you. And Kevin says, how do we distinguish wants from needs? Well, that's a good question. What Scott was saying is that, when he's hungry, he knows he's hungry and he needs to eat. And so when you know that you need to eat, then want becomes somewhat of a luxury item. Well, what do I want? Do I want Chinese food? Do I want Italian food? Do I want a sandwich? That becomes a preference. Want is a preference, whereas need is essential to our well-being. So I need water. I'm thirsty right now. And the waiter might say, well, do you want flat? Do you want sparkling? Do you want flavored? Do you want a soda? What do you need to quench? What do you want to quench your thirst? So using food, I think, is a good way to give us a compass for what the difference between needs and wants are. When to know we should walk out because our needs are not met. So Shireen is asking, when do we know we should walk out because our needs are not being met? And that is a really complicated question because we're all so unique and different. But if you make a list, that's a very cognitive way of looking at it. It's concrete to say, okay, what are my needs? I have this general idea of it. But if I start to say, I need a partner who goes to sleep with me at the same time every night, or I need a partner who has dinner with me several nights a week, or I need a partner who is willing to be in a dialogue with me when I say, I need to talk about my feelings. They don't make fun of me or shut down or mock me. I need someone who also, when I tell them what I want or need, actually follows through with it. Like they start to make a change. I see a change in their behavior so that we're in this together and we're really working together towards secure functioning, towards having a good, solid relationship and communication with each other. And when we actually put that to the test, both of us start to shift and make adjustments and change and are vulnerable with each other, so we see that there's some progress. And the progress might be slow, but our intention is to make it happen, so we start to have a good experience with each other. But if you start to see that no matter what you do to express needs, and no matter which way you make requests or ask requests, that you're always feeling deprived and that you're not getting what you need, and even if you've tried to give your partner what they need and there's no response and you're not happy, then it's time to get out of that relationship. And again, relationships are complicated, and it's important to run these questions by people that know you well, whether it's a trusted, parent or therapist or a friend or sponsor or something along those lines. Stephen says, my attachment to the need getting met is what creates conflict in my relationships. Can you speak to contemporary hierarchy of needs? Well, There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those are really the only contemporary hierarchies of needs I know. But I think that if you get attached to getting your need met and it doesn't get met, but it gets met in a different way, then that's going to be okay. But the attachment to it is the tricky thing. So I'm trying to think of a good example here. If I ask my partner to, move their shoes so I don't trip over them in the middle of the night, and that's a need I have for my safety and security, and it also makes me feel like you respect me and you care about me, then I have an expectation that you're going to do that if you say you're going to do it. If you don't say you're going to do it, then I can't have an expectation of it. Or I can, but I'm going to be disappointed. If you tell me you're going to do it and you don't do it, then we have a problem because you're not following through on what you said you were going to do. And for me, that personally is a deal breaker in my relationship, and especially the closer in the relationships get. If I have a partner who says, I'm going to do this, and they follow through with it, then that feels like love, it feels like respect, it feels like caring, it feels like security, trust. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But if somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it, that feels like a mini betrayal. It feels unsafe over time, and like I can't rely on them to get my needs met, and that's going to erode the relationship. So if you tell me you're going to do it, then I have an expectation you're going to do it. If you don't tell me you're going to do it, then I shouldn't have an expectation of it. And if you repeatedly don't do what you say you're going to do, then I probably can't be in relationship with you. So these require in-depth, close-in conversations with our partners so that there's clarity in our communication about what we need. And let's also keep in mind that everybody feels loved and cared for differently. There are books about love maps and love languages, and it's worth figuring out, if you don't know for yourself, what that is for you. For some people, it's very different than others. For some people, it's the language of actions. For some people, it's the language of touch. For some people, it's the language of metaphor. So get clear about what you really need and how you need it to be communicated also, or how you want it to be communicated. And Louise says, would you say needs and boundaries are similar? I think they're similar, but I don't think they're the same thing. Because I can say that I need you to, I'm going to sneeze, I think. Maybe I won't because I said I was going to. We're talking about needs and boundaries. So if I tell you that, okay, false alarm. Sorry to subject you to that. If I say that I need you to move your shoes and you don't tell me that you're going to do it or not do it, that's one thing. But if I say to you, if you don't move your shoes, then I'm going to start sleeping in the other room because I can't tolerate tripping over your shoes every night, I'm setting a boundary that I'm telling you what I need. You're not willing to help me out or accommodate me in any way. So now I'm going to set a boundary by doing what I need to do to take care of myself. And this is a problem, I think, in many relationships when we lack differentiation. We expect that our partners are going to conform to what we want and need, and they can't always, and they won't always, and that doesn't make them bad people. It just means that we have to make adjustments that they might not actually like. And it's not an adjustment to be retaliatory. I don't sleep in the other bedroom to get back at you. I'm sleeping in the other bedroom because I know that I'm going to break my neck one night as I trip over your shoes when I get up to get something to eat or use the bathroom. So I have to take care of myself, and now you don't have to move your shoes. Aren't you lucky? You might not like that I'm sleeping in the other room, but if you really don't like that, then you're going to have to ask yourself, wow, are leaving my shoes there, is that really worth it to not have you in bed with me? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be, no, it's not worth it to me. So even though I don't like it, I'm going to move my shoes because I'd much prefer that you sleep in the same bed with me. And that is just a matter of the give and take of relationships with each other. So I think boundaries are used to express needs or helps us get our needs met. And I think, yeah, that's essentially what I was just illustrating with the shoes moving to the bedroom um, example. That if you can't help me out with this thing, I've got to find a way to make it work for me. And if when I make it work for me, it deprives you of something, then you're going to have to look at what has value to you and what has meaning. And I always think it's good to think about, if the request from my partner really taking me out of my integrity? Am I really going to compromise something if you ask me for something you need? Like, let's say I'm just in a hurry and I'm rushing around running errands on a Saturday, and I call you and say, how's it going? And you say, oh, could you pick up my dry cleaning for me? I'm not going to have time today, and it would really help me out a lot. And I could say, well, I have a boundary about that, which would be sort of not very helpful at all. Or I can be agitated and think, oh, why didn't you get your dry cleaning yesterday? Because it's making my day more stressful, but I don't really have to be anywhere, and you do. So, yes, I'm going to do that for you. And I have to make it okay internally and not have a resentment and say, sure, I'll do that for you. And then I just do it, and I don't complain about it, and I'm happy to help, even though I might feel more tired or more stressed because of it, but that's how we support each other in relationship, and it doesn't really cost me anything. If, on the other hand, I have an appointment and it's going to make me late, and I'm going to perhaps, aggravate somebody I'm meeting who is potentially going to give me a job, or I'm going to lose money at work, it compromises my integrity in some way, I then have to say, no, I can't do that for you. The boundary might be that when we sit down and we talk on Saturday morning over breakfast or coffee, I say to you, you know what, you ask me a lot to pick up your dry cleaning for you on the fly, and it really creates an impingement on me, so I'd like to set up a better system for us. So this is the boundary. I want to set up a better system for us. And that is, on Wednesdays, I want to look at what we're doing on Saturday so that if you need me to do this regularly, I can factor it into my errands or what I'm doing. So that's the boundary that helps me get my needs met. So they go back and forth. Needs help us express our boundaries, and they help us inform our boundaries. So people have written in about both of these things, and they're all tied together. And this is about healthy functioning, secure functioning, not being dysfunctional, and me, getting your dry cleaning, but then being really angry at you and not saying why I'm angry later today, or setting a boundary that I'm never getting your dry cleaning for you. I mean, these are the ways people can act out with these things. So I think I went through that slide. Okay. So a need for communication is essential for getting our needs met. And the only way we can begin to get our needs met is to enter into a process of transparent communication, both with ourselves and with other people. So I have to get really honest with myself about what I need, and I can't care that it's going to hurt your feelings or that you're not going to like it, because I'm just saying what I need. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it from you. I might have to go do it myself, but at least I'm telling you, because you can't read my mind. You cannot figure it out without me expressing it to you. It might make you super uncomfortable. I mean, I talk about this a lot where sex is concerned. That there may be a sexual act that I'm interested in or I like or I really need because it's part of what's arousing for me. And I think that if I tell you, you're going to get squeamish or you're going to get judgmental or you're not going to like me. But if I don't tell you, then I'm secretly wishing we were doing it all the time, and I'm not really present when we're having sex. So maybe I tell you and maybe it makes you uncomfortable, but you think about it and you're willing to try it, and we both kind of wade into the waters together to see if it can become mutually pleasurable. And that's kind of a reductive, simple way of saying that. But I talk about these issues a lot in erotic intelligence because these needs and sexual needs and differences come up a lot in the world of sexuality. And that's where we most have to practice communication and getting what we want and need. We honestly admit that we require and thus take responsibility for our own happiness. Now, that's a very big statement, right? That I am responsible for my own happiness. And that's not what is advertised to us at all in the happily ever after myth. I meet my prince or princess, and then they make me happy, and then we live happily ever after, and that's the end of it. It's all sort of a Disney story. And the reality is that we fall in love with each other for many, many reasons, many different attractor states, and then we go skipping down the yellow brick road and we run into all sorts of creepy things before we get to Emerald City. That can be, all the things that are in that story. So ultimately, I cannot expect that my fantasy of what relationship is like is going to be played out in my relationship or my marriage. And anybody who's been married for any length of time knows exactly what I'm talking about. That these are oftentimes points of profound grief and loss. Because we never got that thing we were hoping for in that person. And we can resent our partner because they're not measuring up, or they're not who we thought they were going to be, or we're so different. Or we can say, wow, that's just not going to happen. I'm going to have to do that myself. But can I really see this person with the eyes I saw them when I was falling in love, and sort of elaborate or enunciate for myself their good qualities, the things about them that I do love and that have actually come to fruition more than I ever imagined. So I had a fantasy, and I don't know where I got this from, that my husband was going to make all of our travel arrangements, that he was going to be the one that planned vacations and told me where we were going, and that I was going to show up with my suitcase and get on a plane. And this is like a scenario out of 1950s, 1960s, where my fantasy must have been that I was going to be Jackie Onassis or something in Vanity Fair magazine, where she just showed up with her designer suitcases and some fabulous set of glasses and was whisked off somewhere. So I've never had anything that remotely resembles that lifestyle. That was a fantasy I had. And it turns out that when it comes to travel plans, oftentimes I have to make them because my husband's really busy, or we make them together. But there's none of this kind of, like I said, Vanity Fair or Life magazine fantasy of how that gets done. And do I wish I had that? Yeah, I wish I had that. And the chances of me having that are very slim. So I've had to lay that sort of thing to rest and say, you know what, that doesn't make him a bad guy. It makes me have my head a little bit in the clouds, and I need to be in reality about the way the world actually is today. Like, I don't have a private jet or designer luggage. I actually have to pack my own clothes and make my own reservations. And oh well, and what a lucky thing it is that I can even never go on vacation. So these are the kind of things that make us right size when we start to take responsibility for our own happiness. And not only will such expression help us to satisfy our own needs, it also trains us to appreciate those of others, as I was saying, and it affords them the safety and respect of coming forward with preferences of their own. So when I don't lay something on someone else and expect them to be perfect or live in my fantasy, they too can, express their desires or their disappointments even. Scott says, someone else making your travel plans is a want, not a need. I would say that's true, but the need that's embedded in that want is a need that has to do with being taken care of or being treated in a certain way as a female in a male-female dynamic. So there's always something underlying that kind of want that's in a fantasy. And it can be a need for someone exactly. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I guess you're saying that you can have a need for somebody or some specific person, maybe. And I suppose that's true, but I need clarification on that statement. So, any other thoughts about your own happiness? So I meant exactly as to what you had said. Yes, in that case, it's true. It can be a need for someone in that way. So these things about needs and wants are tightly tied. But again, I think wants are typically a preference. Wants are a luxury item. Needs are something that we feel deeply in our core that really makes us feel um, unseen, unheard, unloved, that we want a sense of completion or wholeness or a sense that we're cared about and that we matter. That's what emotional dependency needs do for us, different from the food need or, water. Okay, so how do you voice your needs? It's a really good question. How explicit are you with your partner about what you need? And how do you do it in a way that, where we started, where you let the other person know that their needs matter too? Because we can voice our needs in very demanding ways, very entitled ways that are going to have the opposite effect, that we are not going to get what we need when we become a victim or demanding or childlike or childish in any way. And can you affirm a healthy need for appreciation and affection in a strong and sober tone? So sober for me means a regulated tone emotionally, coming from a place of being solid. And that doesn't mean that when you're expressing your need, that you maybe aren't crying because you're really in touch for how you never got those needs met as a child. And boy, you're needing some repair in this relationship. And you don't expect that your partner's going to be your parent, but you do expect that they know that you're very sensitive about this particular thing. And so they're willing to accommodate to that because it doesn't cost them that much. So you can be you can ask for this in a way that doesn't mean you've got it all together. You can not be together, but not be accusatory or bullying about it. Let's see. I think I need to get stronger within M. I assume that means myself. So yes, we do have to get stronger within ourselves in order to express these needs. Because if we come from any kind of household where we were dismissed, or there was any kind of emotional abuse or neglect or physical or sexual abuse or anything that was dangerous, it makes asking for needs very frightening because the experience is you can't ask for your needs to get met because you're going to be belittled or shut down or hurt. And so retraining ourselves with a safe person allows us to start to see that, oh, I can ask, somebody's hearing me, and I can get this met. And are these natural needs muffled by self-judgments, perhaps in the voices of shaming authority figures from childhood? So there can be a voice that says, well, that's stupid, or don't ask for that, or, you look ridiculous, or all these critical voices, or, that person's going to get mad, or they're going to leave. So you do all these sideways workarounds. And it's passive, it's aggressive, it's not explicit. And then you think you said something, but you don't, and then you get angry because your partner didn't do it right. So there's absolutely no way for your partner to know until you sit down with them, knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball, and start by saying, this is really scary for me. This is really hard for me. I don't know how to do this well, but I want to take a risk with you and tell you what my needs are. Do you think you can hear this? Can you hear it without taking it personally? Do you think you can help me with this? Because I'm not blaming you. These are my deficits, my shortcomings. These are the places that aren't completely filled in for me, and I need you to help me with that. And if you have a partner who's safe and strong enough to hear that, then making yourself vulnerable allows you to have self-compassion. And that's the direction that you want to move in. And if you have a partner who says no, or they're judgmental, or they don't want to hear it, then they're probably not the right person for you. We can learn to ask, and Scott's saying we can learn to ask and people can say yes or no, precisely. If somebody doesn't want to do something for you, they have a right to say no, and then you have to tolerate hearing the no. But at least you know that you're not going to get that thing, so go do it for yourself, or ask your best friend, or ask someone else to do it with you, and then you can get your need met. We affirm that we are neither masters nor followers, but are all co-creators when navigating the needs of ourselves and others. And, if you recall, one of the biggest messages in Mirror of Intimacy is that we are responsible for our own sense of well-being because we're adults now. We're not children. And most of us didn't get what we wanted and needed in childhood. So the repair begins with self-love, living in our own love, so that we can start to love more deeply and get our needs met. So again, that's one of our paradoxes, that if you live as a victim, you're going to be treated as a victim. When you start to take care of yourself, when you start to assert yourself, when you start to ask, and when you don't get what you need, you're able to tolerate it and lick your own wounds and find other people that can get it for you, or you can figure out a way to do it yourself, then you start to be a co-creator of your own sense of strength and integrity and standing on your own 2 feet. And your resentment starts to melt away also, because it's nobody's fault that you're not getting your needs met. You know what they are, and you find a way to do it that's healthy and safe and sane. So let's talk about sexual needs now, because of course getting needs met in the realm of sexuality is sort of the next kind of more advanced thing to do. It's the more scary realm, that's for sure, because we're all afraid that we're going to be shamed or looked down upon or talked out of what we think is right for us or what we want to try even. So in a sexual relationship, we might initially view our needs as conflicting with those of our lovers. And that may or may not be true, but if you're thinking that, then that's a sign that you need to make some sort of statement or change or talk. But it's really only the strategies by which we seek satisfaction that ever conflict. So I think there's a lot of truth in those two statements. So we think the conflict is just by the thing itself, but it's not the thing itself. It's the way we go about communicating what we want and need. So if you want to go on vacation and you know that your family is kind of strapped for money, instead of being straight and sitting down with your partner and saying, I really wish we could go away for a long weekend or take a week away, and I know we don't have a lot of money, but I'm really yearning to go away with you, do you think there's a way we might be able to figure something out? Like I have this idea about Groupons or charter flights or going standby or whatever creative ideas you might have for saving money. And then you have someone who is standing on the side of the situation or problem with you, as opposed to dropping weird hints like, oh, Hawaiian Airlines is having a sale, or, I bought this new dress. It was on sale, but, it's really great for warm weather. Or I bought tickets. That would be even worse, doing it behind somebody's back. So one is collaborative, and the other is passive-aggressive. So we may want to gaze deeply into the other's eyes during sex, while the other prefers to avoid eye contact. I mean, I had this, situation recently where someone says, I think it's weird to look into someone's eyes when they're having sex, because I'm really in my own body and my own arousal, and that is a trance state. That's certainly asexual style, not asexual style, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about being able to communicate what your struggles are and what is difficult for you about the eye gazing or not. So the real needs are, I need connection and I need independence. They're not about eye gazing or not eye gazing. So one person wants one person wants something else. And how do you communicate that and merge that and not judge that and allow for your own experience in your own body instead of constantly tracking what your partner is doing? So any questions about this? All right. So when we talk about understanding the real needs, it's perfectly possible, whether gazing into somebody's eyes or not, to meet respective needs for attachment and ultimately our own liberation. Our desire to feel connected can stem from childhood experience or abandonment, or it can just stem from a desire to be connected, to merge, to be one with, to see what comes up as a result of the connection. It can come from our lover's need for independence, our lover's need for independence might stem from their own childhood experience or coercion. Maybe somebody is working on getting more comfortable with making eye contact during sex, so they're on the way to that sort of connection. And for them, it might feel creepy just to be staring into your eyes while they're having sex. So we have to allow each one of ourselves, we have to allow ourselves and our partners to have their own process along the way. But if we're not talking about it, if we're not communicating it, then we start to project on the other person what we think is going on, and we're almost always wrong when we start to project. So checking out your projections, having explicit conversations about what your needs are, then that allows you to move on to what your wants are sexually, which is when it can be more fun and more free and more playful, is essential to having a healthy sexual experience. If we understand and voice our needs, we can honor them both because we've built empathy rather than resentment. And that's really the key here, that vulnerability leads to empathy for the other and self-compassion for the self. And so you can't really lose with those two things. But the fear is in being honest that we are not going to get our needs met, that we won't be seen, that we will be shamed and shut down or ridiculed and humiliated, which is untenable to the human organism. It's the most painful thing that can happen to us socially. And especially with a lover when we feel so exposed and so vulnerable. And this idea of image management, so someone will love you or want you, is really a form of coercion because you're not being honest about who you are, and you're not allowing them to choose to be in relationship with you. And that's why in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, they talk about, holding hostages, that it's emotional hostage taking when I am, secretive and lying and not telling you who I really am or what I really like and trying to get you to want me in some way, and then it's all false or, made up. So empowering ourselves and others is a natural byproduct of expressing and exploring our needs openly and directly. So I wonder what people think about that, empowering ourselves. When we empower ourselves, we empower others naturally. And that comes when we express ourselves and we explore the truth and we're open and we're direct. And so only nothing but good can come out of this kind of express vulnerability, express truth-telling when it comes to our wants and needs. So you all got very quiet over these last two slides. All right, so let's take a look then at the daily sex acts. Today we're asking you to, before I do that, somebody asked a question. Can you talk about when people get their needs met outside a relationship? Well, if you're not in a, like you're not dating, but you're single, and obviously you're sexual and you desire sex and you desire affection and touch and you don't want to feel lonely, then I think these things have to be practiced with friendships. And if you're isolated and you don't have friends, or you only have friends of the opposite sex, you want to take a good look at why that is. My guess is that would be your tendency to avoid human contact, or you dismiss the importance of human relatedness, because all of us desperately need contact and relatedness. We cannot thrive without it. We're gregarious creatures. We are designed to attach and connect. It's how we grow. In fact, it's how we grow our brains, and our minds only exist in a social context. There is no mind in a vacuum or in isolation. And in fact, we all hear the phrase that people in solitary confinement or that are, living in alone, quote, we lose our minds because the mind requires social interaction. So being able to ask for what you need from close, intimate others is essential. And you're not going to be having sex with your friends or family members, let us hope. But you can ask for hugs and affection, and you can laugh with people. You can talk about your most vulnerable, frightening experiences. And again, a good therapist will help you with that as well. So you'll be getting those emotional needs met in a therapeutic setting where you can actually you're being seen and you're being heard, and you're feeling validated also. So I just want to remind all of you that, if in this moment that you are feeling like you want to talk to somebody, you can call our intake counselors at 310-843 9902, and we have an intake counselor that's willing to talk to you about any of these matters should you need therapeutic help. Um, so anyway, I think that was the last question there. And so if you list your essential inner needs and share them with your partner or a loved one today, that's a really good start. And I began this webinar by saying it's a good idea to make a list of your needs, or jot them down as we're going along here today. But this is a really terrific exercise, and you might not get it done in an hour or even a day. Maybe this week you commit to making a list and say, I'm going to write down what my emotional needs are this week, and just put a little piece of paper or a journal aside, and every time you think of one, whether you're driving down the street or at work or taking a shower, you just write it down and see how long your list is. Maybe you have 3 things, maybe you have 30 things. And to look at what needs do I have, what are getting met, what aren't getting met. And it's challenging when you're not in touch with those needs either, but it's a really good experiment to make. Someone says, over the years, as a spouse of a sex addict, I minimized my needs. Of course you did. With stating my needs, phone, family can get angry about it. Okay, so now stating my needs, people, sorry, that's my blurred vision, like family can get angry about it. And yes, when you are sort of shut down, when you're being subjugated by any addiction, when you start to feel unentitled to your intuition or your feelings, then you really get very deprived and you squeeze yourself into a tight corner, and there you are, and you have no wants and no needs, and you're withering away. And then you find out, oh, I've been living with this addiction I didn't know about, and now finally all this stuff has come back out, and wow, do I have a lot of wants and needs. I'm really angry. I really need somebody to hear my anger. I need somebody to validate my experience. I need to know that I'm going to be okay. I need somebody to help soothe me, sometimes even though I may seem like I'm a screaming banshee because I'm so angry, but I still need soothing and love and care and comfort. And when you start to speak up with family and friends, they don't like it that much. They like it better if you're, in a corner like a plant or a doormat that nobody pays any attention to because they can bulldoze and not have to deal with confrontation. So when you start to have needs and you start to express them, there will be people around you that don't like you, or they want to make you the problem and blame you. And those are people that you're going to have to set some very strident boundaries with, and maybe you can't go to them with your needs. You have to go to safe people with your needs who will ensure that you get them met. So that was a great question. Thank you for that. Paul says, this seminar, as usual, is really clear and authoritative. Alas, it just points out to me how poorly I am doing at these essential needs that you describe. To me, reducing what I need to a minimal amount has become a way of life. For my partners have met requests with shaming and have not asked directly for what they need. I despair my capacity to learn. Even to list the essential inner needs to me seems a virtual impossibility. Thank you for making a space for me to experience the frustration of trying to follow the process in life and in this webinar. So, Paul, I really want to challenge you on this and say that when you're in relationship with people who don't meet your requests, or they shame you because you have requests, or you haven't asked directly, that's a bad choice that you're making. So I want to challenge you to start to take a look at what those needs might be for you. And again, if you think about small children, if you think about a dog, what do dogs need? They need love, they need affection, they need to be fed, they need to be cared for, they need to be, I guess, pet is a form of affection. They need to feel safe and secure. And if they feel safe and secure, they will defend you to the death, right? And so think about the basic needs that your pet has. Or when you see small children, what kind of needs do those children need? And those are your same needs. And if you can make a big list is what I would recommend to you, and then distill it down to, let's say, 6 things, the 6 essential things that you need. My guess is that you can do that, and then the challenge for you is going to communicate them to your partner and then also set boundaries if somebody starts to get shaming with you or ridiculing. And that should be a boundary for everybody, that when I express my needs to you, you can't shame me or get belligerent or make fun of my needs, because that is really violent. That's very much an act of violence. Someone says, I'm a partner of a person who, with narcissistic qualities, don't want to put labels, but he tends to twist things or finds a way to turn things around. We're not married. My sponsor suggests getting out. Any recommendations? Well, what I know about people that are profoundly narcissistic is that you will not change them. And people that are narcissistic tend to be bullying, and they will twist things around because they get wounded. Their fragility is such that they feel like when I express a need to you, that means that I'm telling you there's something wrong with you because you don't have empathy for me. And that's one of the earmarks of narcissism, is a lack of empathy. So if everything I say, or if everything you say, Shireen, to your partner has him feeling like he's being wounded, it's because he's lacking empathy for you. He's not seeing you. He's not hearing you. He can't possibly be there for you. And so you end up taking care of him all the time, which leaves you deprived and not getting your needs met. So I would stand on the side of your sponsor and say, this is not a healthy person for you. And you have to look at what's happening, that you are trauma bonded to that configuration of being with men who will not help you get your needs met. Maggie says, from a Middle Eastern background, it is very common to blame and oversee the spouse. Thank you for your validation, Alex. I feel loved and I needed that. You're welcome. I come from a Greek background, so I know how some of these more machismo cultures can be, especially where there's a demand for caretaking from females to males. And Mary says, I'm also a spouse of a sex addict whose needs were unmet. I repeatedly allowed my husband to ignore my needs and now find too much anger and resentment to remain in the relationship despite the attempts to finally validate them. Well, that's really painful and not uncommon. And so I hope that you use a lot of self-compassion as you're untangling yourself from this and saying that, wow, I really fell asleep on myself. I really let myself be used and treated this way. And anybody who comes out of any addiction is going to be struggling with profound grief and loss. And looking back, and I've had my own experience with this in my 30s, looking back at what I did to myself in my 20s, and I couldn't believe how I hurt myself in order to accommodate someone else. And that I would never, ever, recommend that anybody do that to themselves. So when we start to look at our resentment at ourselves because we compromised ourselves, and step out of not just being victimized, even though oftentimes we are, but saying, yeah, I was a little of both. I was victimized and I compromised myself. We start to have self-compassion for that younger woman. And we say, you know what, it's okay, but I don't know if I can keep living with this person or not. So the second one of these sex acts is that common core needs include inclusion, honesty, stimulation, and harmony. And ask your partner or loved one to reciprocate. It's okay to say, hey, I'm going to start making myself vulnerable and telling you what my needs are, and I need you just to listen and validate them, and I want to do the same for you. And the goal here isn't necessarily to meet one another's needs, but to express and acknowledge them together, which is what I've been saying. So finally, I just want to thank all of you for your great support of Mirror of Intimacy. Tom and I are endlessly grateful for you, for passing the word on to your friends and family members, and for joining me on these monthly webinars. So stay tuned, and I will see you next April. No, I guess not next April. Today's April. I will see you in May, when we'll talk about whatever topic that date is. So take good care of yourself, practice great self-compassion, and see if you can ask to get your needs met this week. All right, take care.